Tell me, is it better to fight in the face of conflict and disagreement, or is it better to work together to overcome it? What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do mean to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Another fun fact. Here we are for chapter 14 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, which is known as an older brother's duty. And man, 4 chapters ago, we were eating takoyaki, and now we're going to war. So this chapter did not actually go the way I thought it was going to go. This is a chapter in a completely different direction. I thought we were immediately hopping into the fight with Yuka and Dabura, but we are not. We are currently kind of having an ideological and philosophical debate. And ultimately, I don't know, maybe it's hard to tell how much of me is biased because I like the characters, and it's biased because of who I am, my own personal identity, and it's biased just because of my own beliefs. But at least to me, from the bottom of my big toes, right? The bottom of my big toes, there is such a clearly, it was even mentioned last chapter, there's such a clear and obvious solution to this conflict as we know it. And this conflict only started or intensified as quickly as it did because of the actions of one man, which it is very true though. How many, when you think about it, in the grand scheme of things, how many world-changing, life-altering, drastic conflicts that had either national or international ramifications were because of the actions of one man, one individual, so many. Of course, it's because humans are interconnected and the actions of one man can have massive rippling domino effects. But think about how many literally billions of life-changing events happened on an international scale because of one man. Think about, I don't want to go too deep in it, but if you know your history at all, think about the 2 greatest conflicts in human history. We literally call them 1 and 2. They were all because of the actions and motivations or the loss of life of one man. So, it is true to form. Humans, we do drastically overreact in many ways. But this chapter, it doesn't necessarily make me side with or care. Well, no, I get it. But at the same time, I feel like the obvious solution is sitting right there. It's already been addressed as one. We'll get to it though, because it is a major focal point in this chapter. And I do think ultimately funnily enough, despite me agreeing with a certain group of characters in this chapter versus another group, I do genuinely believe in truth, in effort, and earnest that both sides, really, I think very specifically one side is wrong. And I think one side could easily prevent this actually being a problem. But it's even acknowledged in the chapter itself that the end of the chapter is very specifically someone being a little bit too stubborn, a little bit too set in their ways, and deciding to solve something in a way that they really shouldn't. But, with that being the case, let's quickly talk about the color cover page right here, which is a beautiful display. Despite the chapter being called An Older Brother's Duty, I think it is very pertinent that the end of the chapter is born of 2 older brothers doing something for their 2 younger siblings. Despite Cross seemingly being outwardly the more mature one, the more serious one, and Maru being the more silly and goofy one, Cross is the younger brother, simply holding a stone. A stone we'll come to reflect on soon. And Yuka is the younger sister, looking a lot more aged, looking a lot more weary, looking a lot more sick, for reasons we'll find out in this chapter. I do think it is pertinent that these 2 characters are put together. 2 characters who now currently dance on the line between life and death. We still don't exactly know the status of Cross. Cross may be dead. I thought if anything this chapter would definitely confirm that. But we don't know the status of Cross, whether or not he's alive or not. But the fact that he's drawn in this very pale, white, almost it's ghostly, right? This very ghostly manner. I think it's meant to imply that Cross may have passed on or is about to pass on, and Yuka obviously looking heavily sick and weak. It's true because of, once again, her sickness has heavily progressed according to this chapter. But it is poignant that we see the motivations for the two older brothers who are fulfilling their duty by the end of this chapter. And this chapter, I guess this chapter really speaks to me a lot specifically because I am an older brother. Just like them too, with just one younger sibling. Though admittedly I am more cross than I am more Tsurugi because I have a younger brother, not a younger sister. But, with it being the case, beautiful color cover page. I love how just, once again, it's not too much of a difference. It's just the eye bags and the fact that her eyes are cut in this way. She looks so much more like her grandfather. And of course, that's not a good thing. Because remember, Yuta, for the longest time, was a very lonely and unhappy man. So this look on Yuka, someone who was once so full of life, is a sign of deterioration. And even Cross here just looks so much more sad and empty as he looks down upon stone. So, beautiful work. Yuji Usagi Sensei. Burning the kitchen down with a pen, as always, in terms of the artistic quality. But, with that being the case, we open up with like a weirdly detached joke thing, but I think, I don't know, it is a short run series, so we're trying to, funnily enough, the chapter is called, this little start of the chapter thing is called Speedrun, and boy, does it feel like we're speedrunning, but in a good way, in terms of like how much I feel and how complicated all this is. But, with being the case, we see Maru learn about speedrunning. Speedrunning was originally a gaming term, referring to how fast one could complete a game, but it's used now in a variety of ways, which is true. Well, like, I don't know. Sometimes I like to speedrun the editing process the best I can, sometimes I don't. It depends on how much time I have between like edit and upload. Like, for example, you can check out the live reaction over on Patreon for those $1 a month. You can remember for $3 a month to check out the 23-minute live reaction to this very chapter. But in terms of me like speedrunning certain stuff, I record like all of the Sunday drops on Sunday, and then I prep them and upload them as quickly as possible so I can have them ready, because I do have work the next day, naturally Monday. So I try to get them all up and ready as quick as possible in terms of the editing, so I can also have them up early for patrons and members. So that's why I try to get through that. So that technically is me trying to speedrun the editing process and the production process. But of course, I like to yap. And I make a lot of mistakes when I yap, so I have to edit the videos a lot anyway. So speedrunning isn't always successful. Just in the same way that getting certain people to do certain things isn't successful. As we see, Maru learns about speedrunning and says, "Oh, hey, Dalbora, come here. They want to take your measurements for your outfit for the dinner party." And Dalbora says, "I heard. On second thought, just have them guess." And we find out that Dalbora doesn't want to wander around the ship too much. He essentially is chilling here. I do hope we get to see more of Dalbora's sister. The way that this chapter was described, I actually was hoping we'd get to see a bit more of Dalbora. Dalbora does make like basically a cameo appearance in this chapter, not just here but later on in a flashback. But like, Dalbora himself is also an older brother, as far as we know. I don't think his sister's meant to be older than him. He's like in a very similar situation to Tsurugi, in fact, being an exception to his own people in many ways, and having a younger sister that he deeply cares for and will do anything for. That's the same thing for Dalbora, but he doesn't actually get much of a mention in the chapter. But this chapter is already packed full of stuff, so I get why he couldn't fit in too much. But he also technically fits into the theming of this chapter, and he has a duty as an older brother. But we see that Maru goes, "Measurement speed run, timer stop," as he immediately failed. But technically he did speed run through it, and it's very, very quick that he got denied. And we see, naturally, Dalbora's like, "Ooh, what's with you? You're a strange child." Or man, because technically Maru is an adult. But with that being the case, we also see a bit that continues off the speedrunning bit, "Scared of Manju." And Maru reads it and says, "I'm scared of Manju, huh? I know those two want to do something that scare me." "I'm not really scared of anything," Tsurugi says, while looking up and away. While Yuka says, "You liar, you're scared of Miyaguni," who is the female sorcerer from last chapter, the female grade 1 sorcerer, who was like, "I would literally perish in Dalbora's presence, there's nothing I could do about that." So, we do finally get her name, and we see that Yuka explains, "Oh, I know it's cliche, but I can't stand roaches. And I can't stand roaches, but I'm not scared of them. I will absolutely annihilate them whenever I see them, but I'm only scared to annihilate them, because, like, if they're pregnant and their eggs fall out, you may be fried, because their eggs stick." The reason roach infestations are so hard to get rid of, you need like call a professional, is because they are very tenacious down to their unbirthed biology. So roaches are very, very messy to deal with. If you see a roach in your vicinity, don't crush it entirely, remove it, and then like light it on fire, or like just get rid of it somewhere else. Do not get rid of it on your own place. It will cause more problems. And typically, if you see a roach, there's probably another roach around. It's a mess. But with it being the case, we see that Maru goes, "I'm scared of Manju. Yep, I'm so scared of them." And Yuka says, "Oh, here's some hot tea." And we see that Maru's like, "Huh? Speedrunning the joke to the end?" As apparently, this originates from a Rakugo story in which a man tells his friends he's scared of Manju in order to trick them into giving him a bunch of Manju to eat. Then he says, "I'm scared of hot tea too," so they give him hot tea next. So Yuka essentially skips to the end of the joke because she knows it. Very, very nice, very, very sweet. I love these interactions between these new characters in the future cast. I hope nothing ever goes bad between... Yeah, it's going bad. So we open up and we see that Mino says, "Are you really going to make Yuka do this, Miyaguni?" And Miyaguni says, "I can't help it. It's our only choice. She told you herself about her illness." Which still has been relatively undefined. A lot of people have just said brain cancer. But like, specifically, it is adjacent to that, but not that. Like, when Yuka reveals the disease to Cross, she's like, it's not that, seemingly, but it's close enough to that she will essentially perish. And naturally, Mino says, "Yes," but, which obviously confirms it. Throughout the time past, Yuka has admitted to others that she has her sickness. She's not just giving it between her and her doctor. And we see that Miyaguni sighs and explains, "There's no way we could take on Representative Dabura." And I do like how even in spite of like the chaos and absurdity behind the situation, they still are very professional when referring to the Somorians, specifically Dabura, or not even just specifically Dabura, the representatives, as they keep saying Representative Dabura. Actually, she says, "There's no way we could take on Representative Dabura with the weapons, the JDSF, the Japan Defense Force, Defense and Security Force, Japan Defense and Security Force." I'm not sure, but the JDSF and the U.S. military stationed here have. So essentially, I thought they were talking about a certain explosive thing. No, they're just talking about like general weaponry, like Splagutas and stuff like that. They're like, that won't work against Dabura, which makes sense. Notably, it couldn't even work against most sorcerers. Like, I think it was in the Culling Games when the militaries in fact did invade, that one of the squad members had to like use a grenade on just a regular random sorcerer. It was the helicopter guy that Yuji fought. Like, they regular firearms didn't work at all. Had to use a grenade. And obviously Dabura's way above that random fodder sorcerer. But with it being the case, we see Yuka in the bathroom washing up and essentially getting ready for her death. Right? Like that. Like she's signed to get like... I know a lot of people are hoping like some sort of Rika summon or some binding vow thing, or the thing inside her head is like some curse thing like that she can release on Dabura. But regardless, all that being the case, she's washing up to die. Right? And like she's already admitted that she's mentally prepared to die because she knows it's basically inevitable, but it is still like, it's different. I'm going to die to a disease that could take me out at any moment versus I'm going to walk into this ring and Dabura is going to remove my head from my skeleton. Those are two different types of being ready to accept your death. And we see Miyaguni say, "It'll only end with a bunch of pointless deaths, and that a US-Japan security treaty wouldn't even apply." Which it makes sense because that would technically is a Japan-caused incident, with Yakumaru being the one to fire on Cross and the whole Kalyan thing, which led to all the conflict. This is all Yakumaru's fault. But, with it being the case, we see that naturally, Mino's like, well, if we can't use traditional weaponry, what about La Bombas Nuclear from other countries? And we see that Minaguni says, "No country wants to bear the shame of dropping La Bombas Nuclear on Japan again. Besides, Japan is a latent nuclear power anyway." Which makes sense, right? Like, notably, I wouldn't be surprised if that was true in our current day as well, where they ultimately would, because like, you kind of need them, like, you never want them to be used, but at the same time, it's like everyone's staying strapped up in order to make sure that no one uses the strap on anybody. Well, that sounds bad. Like, no one attacks anybody because everyone has it. But at the same time, people with it currently now in our world are trying to prevent other places from getting it in order to make sure they maintain less power. It's a complicated thing, but yeah, that's typically how the bombs nuclear are used and will be used probably forever, right? As long as humans still exist. But ultimately, we see that because of the nature of the history of Japan and, you know, 2 suns being dropped on it previously, no one wants to do it again. And on top of that, we find out the stance of the rest of the world, and the UN specifically, has taken. As Mina says, "Although we publicly uphold non-nuclear principles, we still have the materials intact to make La Bombas." And Miyaguni says, "Exactly. So the UN's response was basically, if you want to do it yourself." Guess we're not exactly popular. And this... That is like a... How do I put this? I get the response. And funnily enough, I guess I should have mentioned, is this a group that I agree with or disagree with? I do kind of understand the UN's response. Not only just for the history, but also like, yeah, if you can do it yourself. Since this is a conflict that we entrusted to you, right? Like I think that's the most core thing. The whole world was like, hey, Japan, these aliens are similar enough to you, and you in particular. You have the authority here. You gain the authority with the reveal of like cursed spirits and sorcerers and all that stuff. You take care of it. And then Japan had a loose cannon that fumbled the bag. So why would it be the responsibility? I mean, like, obviously because we're all humans and we all live on the same planet, so naturally, who knows what happens. But still, based on how geopolitics typically work, I'm not surprised that the UN, likely hearing about how the situation went down, one way or another, is like, why would we help you out of the mess you put yourself in? You have the means to deal with it, you deal with it. And oh well, if they don't, fine. They take it. Like, notably, the big thing, and I'll get into it again later, there are only 50,000 Samarians. Dabura is the strongest and all, but like, there are only 50,000 of them. Tokyo holds millions of people. That's like right now. Right now. There are 50,000 Samarians. 50,000 Remelians. They could just give them Tokyo. This fight does not have to happen. They could let the Samarians live amongst the Kallions, quote unquote, which are cursed. They could give all this up, but once again, we'll go more into that later. As Miyaguni says, guess we're not exactly popular. Which, once again, does make sense, as Japan has basically become the world superpower thanks to cursed energy and stuff like that, which only they produce. But we see that Maru is looking down and reflecting upon something. And he asks a simple question. When did it all start? How long has it been difficult for me to really talk with Cross? And we do get a pretty quick answer, as Cross hands Maru something. What's this? And Cross responds, Dad said it was Mole. He was clutching it right till the end. And we see that, well, we know this, but Maru explains, Mole is a special ore that can convert cursed energy into all forms of energy. It's a very valuable resource in Samoria. Dura said that the conflict between the Deskunse and Remelians all started because of Mole. But our father didn't leave us Mole. It was just an ordinary rock. And notably, at the sheer insult of this, right? Like, and I think, you know, let me read the full thing, and I'll go into, like, the complicated feelings that even I have about this, because of me having, like, a specific relationship with my father, and my old, like, the only ties and dynamic I have with my own little brother. But we see that, in a rage, Maru takes the rock in his hand, the ordinary rock, it's not Mole, throws it to the ground, destroys it, and begins stomping it out. Crush, 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 crush. And naturally, Cross is like, Maru, why did you do that? And Maru says, why did he die protecting this? Dad completely lost sight of his job as a warrior, so just forget about him, Cross. And we see tears come to Cross's eyes. And we see that Maru says, I didn't want Cross to find out it was just a plain rock. So I told him that lie. But maybe deep down, I actually meant it. Now, this is obviously, like, Maru asked the question, when was I no longer able to properly speak to Cross, probably talk to him? It was here. It was at the point where Maru destroyed the last remnant of their family, the last remnant of their father in particular. They don't mention their mother all too much, unfortunately, but their father. And the rock that essentially represented him, that last lingering piece of his legacy, he clutched it to the very end. Even if Maru was trying to protect the lie of Mole, or the lie that it was Mole, right? Why did he die protecting the child? Just forget about him. He doesn't say that it is Mole, right? He wants to hide that fact. But I think in this, what he did was he destroyed a piece, a legacy, something that clearly Cross was cherishing and didn't directly show him. This is obviously either right before or right after they get adopted by Dora. So they've been working at stuff for a while. So this is clearly something that Cross came to his brother with as a sign of trust. Like, hey, he essentially shows off the last remnant of the family that preceded them. And I don't think he expected Maru to just destroy it. And I think by his tears, his response, and his focus on warriorhood in particular, and the idea of protecting that simple rock, he destroyed what connection he had with Cross. He's never really been able to reconnect as much as he wants to, because he's never directly apologized for this. And I think ultimately, the rock, if it's meant to be something more symbolic, other than just like, maybe the dad thought it was Mole, maybe it was meant to be something, I think the rock is an ordinary rock. But it was an ordinary rock in Remelian territory. he died clutching that because it was the last bit of his culture that he could maintain. It was all that he could hold. Of course, he had his kids that could still live on to succeed him. But in terms of what he could hold in his final moments, it was that rock. It was the stable symbol of what the Rebellions once were, where they once lived, and what they once stood for. And Cross, who clearly takes pride in his nature, as many other Rebellions do, seeing his brother destroy the remnant of what their culture once was, destroy essentially the last living legacy, the last piece of what their father gave them, to destroy that so callously with such disregard, that shattered their bond. And very specifically, the idea of Moru's father losing sight of his job as a warrior, that perfect ideal of the person who does everything right for the sake of protecting the weak and the women and the children and stuff like that, he sees that as an insult. The idea that in the end it wasn't his father protecting Cross or Moru or anything like that. He was protecting a rock, which who knows symbolically may mean his culture and anything like that, and where the rebellions went, but a rock. He doesn't see the symbolic value behind it. He just sees the failure as a warrior, because that's ultimately what Moru defines himself as. He's a person who ultimately, he defines himself more so by what his role is rather than actively who he is. And that it is a difficult thing, right? Like, it's hard for me to sit back and be like, hey, who are you if I strip away everything that you do, right? Like, or a major thing that you do, right? Like, I work a specific job. If you take away this specific job from me, I can still tell you, oh, I like to yap. Oh, I like to do art. Oh, I like to create content. Oh, I have other things that define me in many ways. But it's clear early on in his life like this, Moru didn't have many things that define him. He just had the idea that he was a warrior, and his father was meant to be a warrior. And that belief, that childish naivete in the idealization of a certain role, it's clear that it backfired in many ways, because it disconnected the two brothers. Clearly, despite them being close, right? Like, they are twin brothers for all intents and purposes. Not even all intents and purposes, they just literally are. It still was enough of a divide that they ultimately could not properly connect. And the specific idea of Moru destroying the rock and telling Cross to forget about their father, forget about their history, forget about their legacy, forget what came before, that I also think disconnected him, right? Because we know that we've seen that Cross is a character who heavily and deeply cares about, like, the past. So seeing that symbol of the past destroyed probably was not at all good. And, let me see. Is it this one? No, maybe the previous one. Village and I were raised by the government. Sometimes I wonder now if it was nothing more than that. So, this is the statement from chapter 8 that I want to reference back to. The village where my brother and I grew up was raised by the government. Our parents resisted until the very end, only to be crushed into the rubble of our home. As my father died, he was clutching what I thought was just an ordinary rock, like it was the most precious thing in the world. But even now, sometimes I sometimes wonder if it really was nothing more than that. So even Cross himself had doubts about this ordinary stone, but it still was something that reminded him of his father. It still was not a living, but a piece of legacy left behind. So destroying that connection to the past for Cross is a mistake that Moru made. And we cut back to the day that Dora died, and very specifically, Cross saving his brother from fighting Dabura. As Cross says, "Let's just run away! He'll kill you!" And Dabura says, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to harm his face." And we see that, and once again, maybe this is meant to imply that Dabura is the younger brother, maybe his sister is older, I don't know. But, with it being the case, we see that Moru admits something in his head. Cross and Dabura were both so kind. And this may sound crazy just considering that Moru seems to be the kinder, more open of the two, but... Oh, sorry, I've been recording all day, so I need to take a sip. But, well, it seems like Moru is the more open of the two. You can tell this is a considered effort, right? Deep in his core, Moru has this deeper affinity for possibly violence, for warriorhood, for being a combatant. And that is what drove him in this moment. And that's why Cross says, "Moru, you're acting strange." Cross is restraining his brother, and Moru naturally looks back, confused. And he admits this about himself. "And I was the only one who felt bound to the responsibilities of a warrior. My father and I were a lot alike, stubborn and set in our own ways. His obsession with Mole cost him his life, and my obsession with being a warrior continued to hurt Cross. And that... let me take it into the simulating pace a little bit. I am lucky in many things in life, but I think one of the main things I am very, very lucky for is the fact that I have my father. That I grew up with my father. That my father was in my life. My father is a very, very interesting man in many ways. One of my favorite descriptors for him is interesting. I always tell my mother, you married a very, very interesting man, Mama. And as interesting and unique and isolated as my own father is in many ways, I love him. And I am him in many ways, shapes, and forms. Not in a literal sense, obviously. I am his son. But I look at a lot of my base reactions. I think of a lot of the things I've done. I think of many things that like define me to this day, right? And this is where I specifically link to both Maru and his father. The stubbornness and being set in our ways. When my dad decides he wants to do something, it will be done. It doesn't matter if it's like a good idea or a bad idea. No matter what, it will be done. That sort of like manic obsession with completing a task once it's been decided is something I've directly inherited. In many ways. This is not as strong as my father in many ways. There's some tasks where I say, I'm going to do this, and I don't. But if you couldn't tell, content creation is one of those things for me. I've decided to do it, so I will. Not in the old wishy-washy way where, maybe I'll post once every couple months. No, I just do it every day. It's a part of the routine now. Because that's a deep stubbornness, that routine, that need for routine. I've inherited that from my father. Same thing with me working out every single day. It's just something that I've done because of that stubbornness that's inherent to me because of the man who created me. And there are many things, and ultimately I think that is a good thing I've inherited from my father. But I also think I've inherited many negative things due to the stubbornness that I inherited from that man, who I love, and I would never have it any other way. But it is complicated, and it is true that the way one's father interacts and raises you definitely does affect how you deal with your sibling. Like, for me, I try to do the best I can for my baby brother when I can do the best I can. But at many a time, I see the same issues that our father and I have in him, and I don't like them. But I can't change them, or I can't force him to change. It's a very complicated thing, but it is true to form that the legacy, the history, the blood of the father will definitely affect the sons, first and second born, anything like that. And unlike Modulo, I will actively mention my mother. I said it before and I'll say it again. I think a lot of my nature, my most base instincts, how I react to certain things, certain stimuli, those come from my father. Very, very reactive man. Not the best choices in many scenarios. But I think a lot of my nurture, a lot of my beliefs that now have become a part of me, but I can definitely tell weren't always there, those come from my mother. And I think that balance is important, and it allowed me to go some way. And I think due to the nature of Samurian culture, I don't think Maru had that balance, despite having a mother and a father when he was a child. And also, he lost his parents at a very young age. But very specifically, the idea that he doesn't even mention his mother, it's sad. Because he doesn't have that to help define him or help redefine him. Maru's nurture is born out of like an adaptive sort of existence, trying to act as the counterbalance. But really, the hard, stern external nature that Cross embodies is what Maru truly is deep down. These stern, locked-in ideals of the warrior that come out at the right provocation, like we see here. Cross is sleeping and restrained. Meanwhile, the more hopeful, the more lighthearted, the more free in Cross is shown to be worn as Maru's face. And it's complicated. It's very complicated. I wouldn't say I'm like an exact inverse of my own brother. We have too many of the same interests and same beliefs that to be like real inverse of each other. And we do have a lot of the same base reactions too. But It is interesting to see the dichotomy and the complications that come with being a father, being a part of your culture, and being a brother. It's a lot. And once again, there are certain experiences in like writing I will never understand because I am older. I don't really get the younger sibling experience. I have like facsimiles to it, but they were very limited. It is a complicated thing. But with that being the case, we see that Maru is sitting up on what seems to be an awning of some sort in the ruined Tokyo, or at least an abandoned district, and says, I just want to talk to you one more time and say I'm sorry. Cross. Now, he doesn't say wanted, as in like he can't do it anymore, but he clearly is here. He's not at Cross's bedside, and I think that is another very important thing, a very important flaw of all of the characters that are involved here. Maru is not at the bedside of his brother, and Tsurugi is not standing alongside his sister. They are both characters attempting to fulfill their duty as the elder sibling, but neither of them are actually there for their younger siblings in their time of need, for they have a conflict all their own. And we see as as Maru holds his head down thinking of his brother, the other elder brother of this chapter comes to the forefront and begins to theorize. Something just doesn't seem right with the Samurian story. Their social structure feels way off what I'd expect of a modern nation, and they're way too similar to Earthlings to just brush that off with the explanation of, like, well, it's because they're aliens. So are the Disgunte running some kind of centralized government with the Rumelians shoved down into the lower class? Maybe, but that still doesn't answer the biggest question. How do they construct the spaceship now, Nox? This is an interesting debate that Tsurugi's having internally. And notably, I think these are two separate thoughts, but these two things can work together. The way that Samuria is described, there's no way they could actually build an intergalactic spaceship that can move. Assuming that the spaceship is in Proxima Centauri, or that Samuria is in Proxima Centauri, the nearest solar system to ours. We find out in the chapter that it took them 2 years to get here. Proxima Centauri is 4.52 light years away. So, they were moving at twice the speed of light just to get here if they were right in the next galaxy over. Or the next solar system over. Next galaxy would take way too long. But next solar system over. But they could be even further. We don't know which solar system or galaxy they're from. But, still, the idea that the Rumelians, the Samurians, are put in this scenario due to something beyond their control, it just doesn't seem to sit right with Tsurugi. And very specifically, their ability to construct the Naonox. It doesn't make sense based on what he's been told and the history he's gotten. So he's going to ask questions. And we see, he says, it's capable of carrying 50,000 people through space. If it's powered by cursed energy, could the Rumelian tribe really be capable of creating such a sophisticated spacecraft? And that is very, very true, right? Like, for example, I don't, like, the fastest spaceships we have, the fastest shuttles we have that, like, have used gravity and stuff like that, they are nowhere near even 1% the speed of light. Like, nowhere near at all. For reference, the speed of light is what, 300? Hold on. I know the speed of sound is like 761 miles per hour, but how fast is light? So I know it can circle around the planet 7 times in 1 second, but how fast is light in miles per hour? Yeah, alright. The speed of light in a vacuum is approximately 670,000. Wait, no. Am I stupid? 670,616,629 miles per hour. For reference, the speed of light, the speed of sound is 761 miles per hour. So, if we do some quick math. Hold on. We're just gonna copy that for a minute. I need to define you, my boy. Let me define you for a minute. Hold on, let me see. It was 670, 616. That was the last. 629. Divided by 761. 881,230.7871 times faster. That's how big the gap is between light and sound. Yet they were able to make it here even though they were still building canals and using boats. I don't know what the fastest thing we ever launched is, but I can tell you it's not 1% of that. That's way too much for the full speed of light. And even if I were to divide that by 100, so this make 1% of the speed of light, still is 8,000 times. Divide that by 100 again to make up for that. It's still 88 times. So like 1% of 1% of the speed of light is still 88 times faster than sound. For reference, how fast sound actually moving when these guys were stuck building canals. But we see that Tsurugi says, even if it was possible with their techniques, there's no way they had enough time. After all, the rebellions took so long to build that canal. And he does remember, and I do like this Tsurugi, who definitely doesn't seem like the more analytical type. He's like running these numbers, crunching these things in his head and be like, nothing is making sense, and I don't get it. But notably, the conclusion he reaches is what I don't fully disagree with. Or no, don't fully agree with. As he says, some irregular, unforeseen thing must have been at work here. And is he missing an eye? I feel like his. Hold on, I'm just looking at this. I feel like his eye is missing here. I feel like it should have been drawn here, but it looks like Yuji Wasaka Sensei forgot. I don't think he's winking or anything. Let's see. And it was you, wasn't it, Maru? We see Maru posted up, sword on his hip. Tsurugi posted up, sword in his grip. Or on his back. I can't tell if he's gripping it up or if he has a sword in his back. I think he has a sword in his back. And we find out the date is January 14th, 2087, the day of the duel. And note how both brothers go Mog for Mog. Maru hits the side profile, always Mew kids, and then Tsurugi hits the front profile, always Mew kids. Hold on, let me see. Is anyone missing their nose in these front-facing shots? Nope, at least nose dots. Nope, at least those dots. See how difficult it is to draw a nose, Suzuki Sensei. Why do you not draw noses? I haven't seen a single non-nose. This is kind of close, but even then you have like the little nose part. But no nose there, but you can see the bridge of the nose. Nose. No, sorry, I'm focusing on noses so much because I said in the Sakamoto's. I guess she doesn't have a nose here, but it could be covered by her hair. But I mentioned how in the these guys don't have a nose right here. There we go. There no noses here. There it is. But and there we go, front-facing cross with nose. But all that to the side. Sorry, I was talking about in Sakamoto days how characters don't have noses sometimes, and it's weird. But everyone does have front-facing noses in this time. It's not Fire Emblem Three Houses. But Tsurugi is serving full face and mogging right now. Jawline of Doom and Despair. Could cut diamonds on that thing. And they are getting ready for something. And we see that notably, despite Tsurugi looking up at Cross, or not, I keep saying Cross, I don't know why I'm mixing them up now. Tsurugi keeps looking up at Maru. Maru doesn't even turn to give him the time of day. And we see that Tsurugi explains, hey, the spaceship Naonox is made from Mole. Mole doesn't just respond to cursed energy, but cursed techniques as well. He's pulling out that thick, juicy, fancy lore. And we see that Tsurugi theorizes, or essentially explains, and the submarines made it all the way to Earth because of a single Jujutsu sorcerer's technique. Right. Which is definitely interesting. That is still, we don't have much context for the curse technique that did this, but it is told to be true, as Maru stands there and says, or sits there and says, it wouldn't have worked with ordinary Mole. The Mole Dura left us was special. It was incredibly pure. Since that area was a place not even the Deskunte could reach, it makes sense that the Mole quality, brain. Since that area was a place not even the Deskunte could reach, it makes sense that mole of quality was right there. Was there. Gosh, I don't know why that sentence would be, but we do see him admit that it wasn't ordinary Mole and that he didn't do it alone. He did it with his sibling. And it is true, we can see all the way back here in chapter, I think it's like 9-ish, we see that, oh wait, no, not here. Go further. It is here. Where is it? Yeah, where they use the super pure Mole. I keep saying Dabra. As Jambaloma says, it can't be. There's something with even greater purity than Mole, which makes you think it was another object, but it seems it's just like super pure Mole. But, with that being the case, Maru explains, also, it wasn't just me. It was my and Cross's technique. And then Tsurugi's like, okay. I see the vision. I've been looking for you everywhere. I didn't actually think I'd find you. And we see that Maru admits, yeah, you weren't going to. But I want to have one last proper talk with you, Tsurugi. And Tsurugi naturally asks, is the reason you could find me? And the reason we can speak Japanese like this together, also because of you and Cross's technique. And Morris says, yeah, it is. Which is crazy! What does, like, don't get me wrong. So far, we don't have any, like, real reason to think this thing's better than the Limitless or, like, Full Potential Shrine or anything like that. But, like, or Comedian, but, like, what can this technique not do? This technique made a bare minimum FTL spaceship. It's allowing them to communicate. It's facilitating everything. Like, it's done so much. And I don't even know what it is. It's crazy. But we see that Maru is admittedly just being very honest, right? Like, he's having this one last talk, and he's giving Tsurugi all the information he could have. And then, naturally, Tsurugi, with this being the case, says, Maru, can't you all just leave Japan? And here, let me do something real quick. I'm gonna hit some jumping jacks. All right. We're gonna hit jumping jacks. Right, ready? See that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh! Okay, we're gonna hit any more jumping jacks. That's gonna keep falling. But we hit jumping jacks. We're gonna do some rotary torso twists. I'm gonna pull the I'm gonna pull the coat over the shoulder. Am I stalling because I'm a little bit eepy? Yes. But that aside, I want to get this review done. This is the final of the 4 batch for today. So I need to get this done and get this ready and exported for the Patreon members. And you have a Patreon member for $1 a month or $3 a month. But regardless, all that aside, I think this is the wrong choice. I don't think, like, call me crazy, call me insane, call me buku bonkers, tickle my toes, and call me Sally if you must. I think isolationism is the stupidest thing ever. I think as a person who is proud, and I mean proud, to be a Nigerian American, mainly Nigerian, like as a person who's proud to be Nigerian, gosh darn it, I think isolationism and separatism is dumb. We all bleed the same blood. We all eat the same food. We all drink the same, like we are all human. The idea that, oh, I'm from this piece of rock and you're from that piece of rock, which is all in the same big rock, and now we must fight over, that's dumb. And they're from separate pieces of rock, but I even think that's stupid. The fact that they're fighting fighting all over this, I think it's dumb. I think isolationism is the worst thing ever. I think especially in the modern day, no less, isolationism is really, really stupid. Shock horror. The world is the world, and we all know the whole world is the whole world. Whenever a country tries to go isolationist or continue to be isolationist in the modern day, I'm like, that's actually kind of insane. Not even in the sense like it's just bad. I don't think it's really a good idea. And at the same time, I'm going to say something else that's going to sound a little bit scary to some people. I know some people are going to like this. I think the more people from other places with different cultures and histories that come to your place, the better. I think immigration is a great thing. It'd be like, pencil, you're only saying that because you're the result of that. Halfway, I also just think it's good because it's never not been good. Having more people with more diverse backgrounds and more information and more knowledge and more cultures has always been a good thing. That's how progress is made. Staying in the same place and not learning new things is boring and stagnant and causes decay. Why would you not want consistent change and evolution and growth? I never got that. Same thing with going isolationist. So when Tsurugi comes here and says, can't you all just leave Japan? I don't think that's good. I think if anything, they should integrate into Japan. I think you should give them Tokyo since no one's living there in the first place. That's the main thing. And before I get even further deep into it, but you can already tell where I'm standing on a lot of stuff that may or may not be pertinent to the current world we live in. We see, and that's also why I think Modulo works very, very well as a story in the time it's being told, because both in where I live and in Japan, isolationism and individual pride, like, it's a whole lot. But we see that I keep saying, why do I keep calling you Cross? Maru says, we can't. Not since the Romelians found out about the Kallians. And we see that Tsuri says, you know about the duel between Yuka and Dabura, right? And Maru straight up says, just forfeit. Yuka can't win. The result will be the same whether she fights or not. And that's true. That's actually that's really, really true. Like, I mean, obviously, a lot of people, myself, and clearly Miyaguni and other people in the universe, believe that Yuka has something up her sleeve. Whether it be the ring manifesting like a last remnant of Rika, plus like a life-binding vow, they'll end up defeating Dabura, and then the Submarines kind of just have to like vibe out without their king, or vibe out without their strongest asset. Fine. But even still, I think, like, I think they cause more trouble than just letting, like, once again, it goes back to the ideas of, like, immigration. Why do you think it's kind of stupid? Why be anti-immigration? And there's no reason, because the more, like, and now we're getting into weird, like, economics things. But I'm gonna go into a bit. The more people who are able to participate in your economy and get jobs within your economy means there's more money flowing into the economy. Why would we ever want less people? Why would we ever want less people? Especially for people who are so concerned about birth rates dropping. In fact, you need, and immigration has allowed certain countries to even maintain their current populations without falling off a cliff. Because more people need to come in. Like, I don't get the idea of exiling people. And I don't, and specifically in the context of this, right? Because I'm talking a lot of real world stuff here, and like a bunch of countries are really like, oh, we can't let other people come in, even though it's like a very fantastic thing for economic growth that we supposedly deeply care about. That aside, in universe, why do they care so much about Tokyo? Oh, but if they give it to the Romelians, the cursed spirits could spread out. The cursed spirits are going to spread out regardless. That's right, regardless. Because you're not letting them interact with them. You have no idea how that would go. Let them do it. You are the ones who shot one of the representatives. Let them do it. Like, I don't get the point of fighting over land that's long since been abandoned. If it's truly the case that it's been abandoned since Shinjuku, it's been 80 years. No, 67. 67, not 60. It's something. It's been multiple decades. There's no one there. Give them the land. Let them live there. Let them do something with it. And then, like I mentioned last chapter, either let them work something out with the cursed spirits, which they interpret as Kallion, which I don't think they are, but still, let them, if they work out, good. If it works out badly and a Sumerian is slain by a Kallion, then y'all can work together anyway. The resources of how many Sumerian warriors would definitely help out Jujutsu High, who's struggling to do what they can right now. There is no, like, and this is why, at the beginning of the video, and I'll say it again, I think the humans are kind of just wrong here in being a little bit dumb, arrogant, and stupid. Which is fine, because welcome to humanity. But there's no reason to fight this hard for Tokyo. If anything, giving them Tokyo and allowing them to take over that land, or not even take over, just live there and then integrate wherever they want. Sumerians can leave, let them just integrate into society. By allowing that to happen, even if cursed spirits spread out, they're not going to be able to keep track of every single cursed spirit that leaks out that goes somewhere beyond the borders of Tokyo that you then slaughter for the sake of maintaining the peace around there. You can then spend more of your resources not taking care of the Great Purification Ritual. They will do it themselves. If either take care of it or take care of the cursed spirits that are in there, meaning that they don't have to worry about that. There are so many issues that could be resolved by them actually just working together. That conflict between the two does feel like just genuine human stupidity. But that is true to form for humans, unfortunately. Unfortunately, if there's any living species that knows a thing or two about unnecessarily mass conflict and making things way more difficult than they have to be, it's humans. We do it all the time. Whether it be on a small individual scale, you know how often I get in my own way, and how often we get in our own way on a macro scale. It is true. And that is the main thing. I don't get why they're so adamant on not giving the Sumerians land that isn't even being used when the Sumerians could do so much for them as allies. Why make enemies out of people who don't want to be enemies? They just want to live. I don't get that. I don't get making enemies out of people who just want to better their lives. That's all the Sumerians are. If they want to better their lives, they would not and have not fought yet. And they only fought when they was a cultural misunderstanding that is still typically the humans' fault for not explaining everything about cursed spirits. And on top of that, they fought over, humans booming one of their own, one of their saviors, no less, one of their messiahs, essentially. So, yeah, I cannot side with Tsurugi. I cannot side with humanity here, which is crazy because I'm human. But still, we see, and Tsurugi explains, but I don't know that, and that's what's giving me trouble. Yuka was sick, and her illness is progressing faster than the doctors expected. I was a total idiot for not realizing something was wrong, but it's not important now. There's something Earthling sorcerers use as a last resort when their lives are on the line. A binding vow. However, and you know what, I'll go into it as Mar responds, and it boosts their cursed energy and techniques. That still doesn't mean she could beat Dabura. And that's true. We've seen, life, well, to be fair, not necessarily life or death, right? Miwa just said, I'll never hold a sword again, which did affect her for the rest of her life. And Kenjaku just no sold. He just and like didn't do anything, because it doesn't matter if you're massively weaker than your opponent. You can make as many the life and death binding vows as you want. It's not gonna be enough. And same case maybe for Yuka, unless she does have some sort of Rika crazy last potential thing. Once again, thanks to JJK Modulo not really being a fighting manga, we don't know Yuka's technique or her potential. We saw her do the Cursed Energy Claw thing, but that could just be a generic application of Cursed Energy. We do not know what Yuka's actual potential is. We haven't seen her fought. They don't know. And who knows, maybe a life binding vow could be enough. Choso with a life binding vow was able to survive Furnace. Keep Yuji completely untouched by that. That was actually crazy considering how powerful Furnace is. He did that. Sugata and Choso were in two entirely different universes, but it didn't matter because of the death binding vow. So, same thing with Yuki making the black hole, presumably. Death binding vow. But I don't know what Yuka has that a death binding vow could be worth it. But at the same time, I don't get it. Like, say, like the gamble of the death binding vow failing would still lead to the Sumerians getting what they want. And why throw up all this red tape? Why throw up all this? Just give them Tokyo. Why? And for you wondering, well, what's the real life analogy, Pencil? You just want people to come in and work for their right to live like they have to do basically anywhere else in the world? Yeah. Whoa. Very scary, revolutionary thing. I think if people are trying to better their lives, we should give them the opportunity to better their lives. Oh. There are jobs certain people in a certain place that want to do, but there are people who are willing to do that work, especially for mercifully less. It's if they're willing to do that, which I think is still really, really bad. Like, that's the, I don't get being anti-immigration at all. I know I'm biased. I'm literally Nigerian. But still. But all that aside, Maru is right? Ultimately, a life and death bounding vow may be very powerful, but may not be enough. Unless Yuka does have some crazy secret super potential that we just don't know about, because we haven't gotten much context for Yuka as a combatant. But, with it being the case, we see that Tsurugi, one thing I want to point out real quick. I do like that Tsurugi admits, I was an idiot. I was a fool for not realizing something was wrong. And that is something that's true, right? Like, as an older sibling myself, I don't fully understand my younger brother. I know him very well. I've known him before he knew him. I've known that boy since before he was sentient. I knew that boy since before he was born. Gosh darn it. But I still don't know everything about him. And he knows me well enough to be able to hide and misdirect and misguide many things. So, I haven't had a moment like this, obviously. Fortunately, no. I haven't had a moment like this, but I do understand that feeling of guilt. Like, I just didn't know. We just weren't paying enough attention. Something just wasn't, things were not clicking in time. And that is a rough feeling to live with as an older brother. But, with it being the case, we see Suri explain, Yuka's been searching for something worth taking her life on all this time. She thought since she was going to die soon anyway, she might as well die for someone else's sake. But the thing is, she's not dying for anyone's sake. She's dying to help oppress. Like, that's the thing. I don't get it. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if Gege expects me to side with the humans. But, like, I'm sorry? Am I supposed to cheer for the people who, like, this is going to sound really bad, who unloaded on a minority that was reaching for their weapon, quote unquote, and then refusing to grant them a place of residence that they could easily grant them with no detriment to themselves? Like, I feel bad for Yuka, but I don't think the humans are in the right. I don't think Japan is in the right. I think they should just give them Tokyo. Like, but maybe that's me being too idealistic and dreaming, but like, I don't know, this is a world of magic and everything. You mean to tell me you just can't give up a land for 50,000 people when that land was originally meant for millions of people and just let them live with the cursed spirits if they want to so badly? Like, I don't know, man. I'd be way more down to just experiment and let them vibe out if they want to vibe out. So let them vibe out, but not here. But we see that Tsurugi says something very important. But I want to stop her from fighting in the stool. Today's not the day that Yuka should die. If she only has 3 months left, I want to live out those 3 months. And we see Maru look very sad at this. Even if it ends up being one more week, or even maybe tomorrow. That's what it means to be an older brother. Right? Maru? And we see, in this case, he is actively reaching for his weapon and drawing his blade. We're not drawing it just yet. He puts it in hand, though. As the older brother, this is his duty to make sure that his sister can live. And I'll go into the contrast of these two characters. I mentioned it already, but we see that slightly different. Yeah, they are different drawing. But we see Tsurugi's like, please, take the rest of the Sumerians and leave Earth. This is an honest request from Tsurugi as a friend. They were hoping that they could be different. And this, once again, it feeds all the way back into... In fact, let me quickly go over here. Let me go over here and pull it up. They were hoping to not end up like the tiger. The original tiger, Ryunosuke. Torinosuke. They were hoping that things could go well, right? They were hoping that they wouldn't end up fighting, wouldn't end up needing to slay each other like Torinosuke, and hopefully end up living together, happily. Like the new Lion Cub could. But now they're in a position where that doesn't seem to be the case. Or at least they don't want it to be the case. And Moru explains, 50,000 of my compatriots are aboard Naunox, including many women and children. Once again, remember, one of the main purposes of a warrior is protect women and children and do whatever you can for them. When we left Samoria, it took almost 2 years to reach Earth, even using our technique to its fullest extent. So, actually, is this a JJK upscale? They're able to use their technique at FTL speeds? Maybe Kashimo was light speed? But I'm kidding. But our technique to its fullest extent. But we finally found a place where we can put down roots. Up until now, everyone was terrified that we'd drift around forever and end up a speck of dust in the vast darkness of space. And that... So once again, like... Am I wrong? Am I wrong for just feeling bad for the Submarines and not really getting what the humans' beef is about? Like... I feel bad for... yeah. That's what... And, like, sending them off. And, like, very specifically, sending them off in this context. You lied to them. In many ways, or withhold a whole bunch of information that you could have given them from around start to avoid this conflict in the entirety. You could have avoided the entire conflict of the Great Purification Ritual if you'd just been more upfront about the nature of curse spirits from one. So there's that, for one. For two, you coop them up on their ship for forever, right? You make them still live up there and just give them supplies to maintain themselves. Okay. For three, you let one of your own men unload fire and essentially, basically, we don't know if Cross is alive or not, but slaughter one of their own. Or in the pretense of, he was reaching for a weapon, though. And then you're like, okay, now leave. We know you spent all this time trying to adapt to our culture and communicate with us and bond with us, even though you could have just sent Dabura to slaughter us in mass. Because he still don't have an answer. Yuji didn't show up. Yuji's running. He's not helping. He's not contactable. Oh, and I do mention one thing at the start. And I'll do it real quick here. Thank you for everyone who pointed out, yeah, Yuji may have just changed, right? Like, he was a kid when he made the declaration of, yeah, I'm going to be good, I'm going to be the next Gojo and everything. But Yuji struggling with the title of the strongest, the title of immortality, the struggle of immortality, all that actually is really, really good writing, and him changing to, like, abandoning his friends. It's a really dark way to take Yuji, but it's a very human way to take Yuji. Once again, actually good writing for the character. And also, Nabar, a lot of people point out, Nabar could be lying. To them specifically. Yuji may have told her, hey, if they come looking for me, tell them they can't find me. But in reality, he may be in contact with Nobara right now. And if Toto's still alive with Megumi, he still maybe want to be there for his friends, right? Like, he's not running around Tokyo itself, like, slaughtering her spirits. No, he's just doing his own thing. So it's a twofold thing. One, he may have, just changed due to the nature of humanity and the curse of immortality, or at least longevity to the point of basic immortality. And two, Nobara could be lying for the sake of protecting her friend, which wouldn't be the first time she's done that. So, like, it actually does make sense either way. So I was being a little bit mean. Any critique I have with the last chapter, gone. It's actually just gas. But in this, I cannot feel anything but pity for those who want to just live. That's what I mean. Like, I can't sit here and be like, oh, the Sumerians are in the wrong somehow for wanting to, not go back out into the void of space after they're already outcast from their previous land, for the great horrific crime of not being told all the information and having severe biological reactions to the slaughter of a creature that they deeply care for and are biologically tied to. Oh no, they're such bad people? Exclamation point. I'm supposed to feel bad for the humans who shot one of the Sumerians over nothing. I'm supposed to feel bad for the humans who could just give up the infested land that isn't even being inhabited by humans anymore. Like, I don't know. I think this is intentional by Gege, because once again, this is very heavy commentary. And also, like, if it were like a more valid, like, I'm trying to think, It'd be one thing if Tokyo wasn't abandoned, right? Like say Tokyo wasn't abandoned. Say Tokyo was being lived in by humans, of humans, full of humans, all that. And the Sumerians they showed up, were very aggressive, like, I want that, and we're gonna take that right now, no matter what. That'd be one thing. But the Sumerians are just like, they are literally a solution to a problem that they've been having for decades. That's only going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So they might as well try a new solution with these new people who've shown up to possibly help. But instead, you're supposed to just be mean to them. Like, I don't know, man. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't rock with it. Humanity fumble in the bag. Kind of like normal. But with it being the case, we see that Tsurugi has blade in hand and Maru lands from the roof. And he explains, there's no place for us left on Samoria, and there's no guarantee we could find another planet. I'm sorry, but we won't leave Earth. He takes off the eye patch, revealing his third eye. And then, if you're going to talk about Yuka, what about the Kallions? And what about Cross? And, like, notably, I do agree with the idea that Cross was pushing. Like, Kallions are not actually, the curse spirits are not actually Kallions, right? By the way they die, the way they perish. They do cause a similar biological reaction. But if they were truly Kallions, it wouldn't actually be that bad. They would have died by feeling and hearing the voice of so many Kallions dying. But, like, clearly they're not actually Kallions. No doubt. Like, they even abandoned all the Kallions back on Samoria, right? Like, presumably all the Kallions that are on Samoria, they didn't take them all with them. They're dead. Like all the Kallions got slaughtered in mass back home on Samoria anyways. Like, clearly, it is a cultural difference that they're willing to abide by sometimes. But still. I don't think it really is about the Kallions for Cross. Though actually, it's not Cross, Maru. It actually may also be about the Kallions and about Cross. Because it's a mix of the responsibility of being an older brother in the case of Cross. Which I think speaks to Maru's heart all the more. Because he hasn't been able to connect with Cross properly. But also, the Kallions because of what their role is as warriors. To protect the women, the children, and the Kallions. So even if they aren't actually Kallions, even if they're close enough to it, Maru is feeding into his role. He has nothing else to define himself by. Just like his father couldn't define himself by anything but Maul. And now he stands opposed to a man he wanted to be friends with. A man he wanted to be neighbors with. They now go on to fight as blades are drawn. And we see that in response to the baring of the third eye and the gripping of the blade, Tsurugi changes his tone. My bad. I phrased that wrong. I meant to say, get the heck out of here, Maru! He wants them gone. I still don't think, like, you only get to the end. As Maru says, I can't! Because I'm a warrior! He draws his blade, gets ready to fight, as the plane that contains Yuka flies overhead. She's flying to the duel. Note that this is the plane. We see it load up. We see her go in, and it flies overhead. The two brothers fighting for their siblings' lives. What it means, the worlds that they protect, as both sorcerer and warrior. They stand opposed. And like I've said throughout the review, if you can tell, hold on, let me do a couple things. First, W chapter. No da. Chapter's gas. Alright, we get on that front. But, big butt booty butt cheeks. Do you notice something that's weird? Something that's strange? These two characters, these two brothers, are fighting for what? At the core, at the base of all their motivations. Even if their very worlds hang in the balance, right? The world of the rest of the Rumelians, the 50,000 compatriots, and the world of Japan, and the many other people on Earth. All that. They're fighting for all that. Right now. With each other. But what is their core fundamental motivation? What are they really doing? What is the chapter called? The duty of not a warrior, not a sorcerer. The duty of what? An older brother's duty. Note where they aren't. They're not with their siblings that they're fighting for. Tsurugi could have talked to Yuka. Could have been begging her to not do this. But no, he's not doing that. He's gone to tell Cross to go. So he's gone to Maru to tell him to leave. Take his people out of here. So Yuka can live another day. He's fighting for Yuka, but he's not fighting with Yuka. He's not fighting alongside Yuka. He's not with Yuka. He's letting, literally, I think it's very poignant that the plane flies off in the background. It's gone. This little plane right here, it goes away. Because Tsurugi isn't there fighting for Yuka. He's doing his responsibility primarily as a sorcerer. And same thing for Maru. We don't know if Cross is dead. We don't know if Cross is at a burial. We don't know anything about that. But Maru isn't with cross. With the brother he wants to connect with the brother he wants to talk to just one last time. No, he's standing here and fighting Tsurugi. Why? Why are both of these characters not with the siblings they seemingly cherish so much? Because one, it's not in their nature. And two, because they have other jobs to do. They stand as both sorcerer and warrior here. They are a sorcerer and warrior who happen to be elder brothers. They're not elder brothers who happen to be a sorcerer and a warrior. And I think this is very interesting commentary on what it means to define yourself by what you do. I think what you do is very important in defining yourself. If someone were to ask me, hey, Pencil Man, strip away everything that you do and tell me who you are, I would then have to, define myself by my family. Right? Because, being a son isn't a job. Being a grandson isn't a job. Being an older brother isn't a job. That's just a part of who I am. You strip away all that I do professionally and online. That's what it is at the core of it all. I am, at the end of days, a son. A grandson. My mother's son. My father's son. My little brother's elder brother. That's who I am when you strip everything else away. And ultimately, I am happy with that. And I am okay with that. Strip everything else away, I can still be defined by the blood that pumps through my veins. And of course, I'm a friend in many ways. And that's not a job either. But you can see where my mind immediately goes to when I ask that question, I think about it. It goes to family and then friends. But it's clear that that's seemingly not entirely the case for both of these elder brothers featured in this chapter. Both, and it's very poignant that Maru himself admits it, right? Where ultimately, my father and I were a lot alike, stubborn and set in our own ways. His obsession with Mole cost him his life, and my obsession with being a warrior continued to hurt Cross. And it still hurts Cross now. Even as he fights for him, even as he stands in opposition for him, supposedly, it's being a warrior that takes precedent. That is the danger of defining yourself by what you do and what you stand by instead of who you are. Now, of course, I'm not saying you have to define yourself by your family. I know many people who refuse to define themselves by their family for good reason. And that's fine. But I do think it is a dangerous path to walk down to solely define yourself by what you are and what you do. And for those who I know who do not define themselves by their family because they heavily disagree with them for good reason, they have other ways to define themselves. Like I said, family comes to mind to me first because I love my family deeply and I had a healthy family and do have a healthy family dynamic. But the friends who I know who don't have that, they define themselves by their friends, by their found family, their chosen people. They don't define themselves, well, some of them do define themselves by their work, and I work for them, but still, that is the thing. That is the difference. At their core, both Tsurugi and Maru are warrior and sorcerer first, before they are brothers. And I think they don't know that. And I think that's why this conflict will not end with either of them truly slaying or destroying each other, because that's not what this is meant to be. That's not what this is meant to do. These two men need to realize that they need to be there for the siblings they care so deeply about, not fight for them. The importance of that bond, the importance, their true duty is not to be a warrior but a sorcerer, but to be an elder brother and to be there for the siblings they so cherish. So there's that. It's why I do kind of wish that Dabura was in this chapter more, but now that I've thought about it as I've talked through the whole review, I get why Dabura wasn't so heavily featured, despite him also being implied to be an elder brother to his sister. Because when you think about it, at his core, even with his promise to Dura, Dabura first is an elder brother, and he is then a Deskunte warrior. He does everything, including slaying his own best friend, for the sake of his sister. That is his weakness as the strongest. But yet, in spite of that, the reason he's not featured heavily in this chapter is because the elder brother's duty is what defines Dabura. It is not his nature as a Diskunte warrior first. Unlike both Maru and Tsurugi. And I like that. Once again, the fact that this is only chapter 14, and this is a short run manga, the fact that Geiki's been able to rip these thoughts out of me, these complications of my own reflection, like the fact that I'm thinking about like what do I do as an elder brother? How I feel about that and the complications about that and just the nature of the conflict. And how, in spite of how I could see some people say, oh, it's rushed, it's happening too quickly, how true to form it is. That everything's happening the way that it's happening based on just how the world is. If you look around, you can see that something like this would happen. Probably happen even quicker. Because of just how volatile, how reactive, and how stubborn people and humans are. And that complication, it's sad in many ways, but in many ways, it's human. It's beautiful. And I'm glad Geiki just keeps cooking with gas. So, let me get it for the two time. Yeah. W chapter. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave not just a here we go. Not just a brother. Not just a brother. In the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do want to have a Patreon down below where you support me for as low as $1 a month. Get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. And so now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks include the 23-minute live reaction to this very chapter, ad-free variations of all my videos, early ad-free access to all my videos. And when I say all my videos, I don't just mean all the videos on this channel. I mean all the videos on the second channel. That guy with a reaction where I drop 45 minutes to 2 hour plus long reaction videos over there every Saturday at 1 p.m. EST. The link will be in the description down below. If you become a Patreon member over here, you get access to all the videos that will go out over there weekly. And on top of that, you get your name listed at the end of literally every single video. If you are a $3 member or higher, you get the perk of having your name read aloud, not just listed at the end of every single video. And on top of that, if you just want to drop 5 beans for a short video or 25 beans for a long video for the one time, because you don't want to do the whole membership thing, you could just join and cancel whenever you want. Remember, joining does give you access to literally everything, all the perks. And if you don't really like it, you can just stop it anytime. But regardless, you want to do it for the one time, the Ko-Fi is in the description down below. But now, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Yomi, Buddha Ura, Enzo, Swift Strike, Super Flame Zero, Yuki Ally, Striker Man, Grim, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, CCC, Ramondo Furen, Dino, Heath Nelson, Hector Gonzalez, Black Sage, Tim Thomas, Alex Kenny, Kaving, Julian Perez, 8SOA, Akolade Babatunde, Union I, RXN, Nevis97, Sheesh King, Logan Guzman, Karina Hernandez, Window Life, Dead Meme, Karudir, Reina, Christian Carter, Jagoda, Keon Stewart, Donovan McIntosh, Sino King, Hamza Idrisi, BNA DNA, Edwin Igbinoba, Cyan, Straw, Cybersage 12, Athenzi Shear, Antavius Mitchell, Plant Crone, Azo2404, and Create Panem. Then, let me give a thank you to Artline Art Tier patrons, A+A, Kevin Encarnacion, Sean, Dreadzoan, and Norgazi Andasov. Then, let me give a thank you to our Ink Tier members, King RTX and Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06. And let me give a thank you to our Digital Art Tier members, J Warrior and AZ Void. And let me give a final thank you to our Colored Art Tier patrons, Walkie Munoz and Walkie Munoz.